In today's video, I'm going to see if you can get amazing edits with just one click in Lightroom. Let's take a look at the photos we're going to see. So what I want to do today is check out auto editing in Lightroom. This is obviously a function that's been in there for some time. There's just a big auto button at the top of the exposure panel. And for the most part, I ignore it, as I imagine a lot of photographers do. They think, oh no, auto settings, that's beneath me. I want to take manual control of everything. And for the most part, that's great. But this software is really sophisticated, and it's got some amazing tools that do a lot of stuff automatically that we do trust. So I thought it'd be quite interesting to take a bunch of my raw images, click that auto button, and actually see what Lightroom comes up with, and then see how maybe I would take it further, or whether I'd do something completely different. So I'm going to dive in first of all with this shot of this nice couple having some food down at Southend Pier. This is a shot I took last year. I was really pleased with it. I think it's got a lot of emotion and mood. I just love this fella. They're sitting there having their food overlooking the nice bay. There was a beautiful sunset going on, and the camera has sort of corrected for that warmth in the sunset. And just given it quite a neutral tone overall. And in the edit that I originally did, I tried to bring that back as much as possible. So let's just start out. Now, the button that we're looking for is in the exposure tone panel here, and it's just auto. Now, Lightroom actually doesn't have a lot of auto settings. It encourages you to kind of dive into the settings at a slightly deeper level. So sometimes beginners can be thrown off a little bit by all the different settings that can be there. And for the most part, I would encourage you to literally just go in and play around with those sliders and see what each one does. And once you learn what it does, you know how to then use it properly for your future edits. But you can see that as we sort of move down, we've got auto for tone, but then presence, there's no auto for presence, and there's no auto for the HSL panel. There's no auto for split toning. Things like that start to come into play when you use presets. Like that is basically auto, one click, you apply a preset which does all of the exposure, all of the color balance, all of your tweaking, and applies that to an image. We're not going to do that. We're going to look at Lightroom itself and its auto mode. So let's start off. We've got our image here. We can see that this is fine, but it's a pretty flat raw file. Let's go ahead and click auto. Okay. I mean, straight off the bat, I'm going to be honest, I think it's done a pretty decent job. It's not too far away from, I think, what I would want to do. Of course, then we've got white balance. Now, there is an auto white balance mode. So let's go ahead and click auto. Oh dear. Okay, so auto white balance on this it's done a very good job of correcting the color to try and bring everything back to very accurate tones. If we just have a look at this Dr. Pepper bottle, that is basically the exact tone that a bottle of Dr. Pepper should be. Same goes for this Apple Tango. Great choice. Everything looks as it should do. But the problem is that with this shot, I don't want it to be corrected. There were these lovely rich orange tones. You can see in the sky how much like cloud detail, and there's light streaking across up there. So what I want to do is warm it up quite a lot. I'm going to bring it right up. I'm also going to bring that tint up, because bringing that purple back in there really helps boost that dramatic feeling of a sunset, as those purple tones, particularly in the shadows, as you can already see what a difference that has made. I can stand to bring that up a little bit more. Something like that, I think, looks good. As you can see in the tone itself, it's brought those highlights right down. I think that's good because we've got a lot of highlight detail in the sky. Yeah, I think it's brought it down the right amount, loads, basically. And again, with the shadows, it's brought it up, and that's brought out the detail on these people's coats. If we just reset the shadow detail to basically the midpoint, we can see that we've got basically a lot of darkness that we need to bring out. So yeah, I would say bring that up I can't remember where it was, but I think around there is probably what I would want to do. Whites and blacks, I'm pretty happy with what it's done. I'd maybe push those whites slightly further to around 20, which just helps bring back a little bit of pop. The blacks, yeah, I'd probably reset those. I don't think we need to drop the blacks on there at all. And the contrast is up just a little bit. And if we bring that down, then we do lose a lot of that pop. So we're going to bring it up as well. In fact, I think that let's bring it up to about plus 10, I think is a good point. Obviously, one of the things that Lightroom can't do in its auto mode is sort out your crop. So we are going to have to go into the crop tool, straighten it up in line with the horizon and the wall, which is about there. And I'm going to bring it in the bottom. And I'm going to bring it down at the top. And you know what? I'm not going to do a custom aspect ratio. I'm going to do this at, I think, 5:7. But we're going to bring it out a little bit from there. And there we go. Something like that, I think. But that's been, what, a few minutes of an edit to take it from this raw file through to this much more romantic-looking sunset scene. And Lightroom's auto mode has done a lot of that for me. So let's move on. And this is a shot I did in Dungeness. I did a whole video around going and getting these photos. And this shot of a lighthouse I really liked. It's helped, of course, by having quite an interesting sky. But as a raw file, it is very, very flat. There is very little contrast. If we just have a look at the histogram, all of that information is really in the middle of that histogram. We have not got deep blacks on one side. We have not got bright highlights on the other. It's all quite a flat tone. Let's see what the auto mode does. Okay, and again, you know, this is very similar, I think, to the shot that I ended up coming out with. I did bring those highlights down just a little bit. I do think that boosting those shadows is a good move, because particularly around the bottom right of the scene, it getting a little bit dark, so that is good. Dropping those blacks, yeah, you know, I'm feeling that a little bit. And certainly bringing up that vibrance does help just give it a little bit more pop than it had before. As I say, it was quite flat. The colors were quite muted. And of course, that is part of the charm of this photo. And what I was worried about, that the auto tone might go a bit too far and make it super crunchy, super poppy, and really try and put a lot of detail in the darks and in the highlights. I didn't want that. It would spoil the mood of this shot. It would spoil the ethereal kind of atmosphere that was there on the day. I don't think this has gone too far. And in fact, I think there's very little else to the tone that I would really want to do. Let's just flick back and forth. It's not done a major shift. It's pumped up that contrast a little bit. And I think that is a really cracking effort. Now, again, it's not going to do the crop. So what I'll probably do is put a 69 crop on this. I like that cinematic widescreen feel. Put that lighthouse very much in the right thirds. Press apply, and there we go. I think maybe I would, in Photoshop or maybe in Lightroom, try and just take out some of these, oh dear, some of these distracting elements down here. There is some lens fringing going on here. We can get rid of that as well, because of course that isn't part of the auto things, the lens corrections. So we put chromatic aberration on, and away that goes. So obviously make sure you're doing that on your photos. Overall, I think that's a really, really good job. And, you know, I could play around and see if I want to change anything else. And if I was doing this for gallery work, portfolio work, then of course I would spend the time in seeing if there's anything else I could do. But looking at this now, I don't think it needs anything else. And I would be very happy with this as a one-click edit. So we're going to move on. And this scene taken in Slovakia on a hike I did last year, which was a beautiful scene, but I was brutally hungover, and it was about 30 degrees. So it was a tough day. So let's go ahead, because I like this scene, and I really like capturing it, because we've got this ski jump fits between the two hills, two mountains, which I think really frames it, as does, of course, this greenery, this tree that I've used as a frame around the whole scene. There's obviously plenty wrong with the overall exposure, with the white balance. So let's go ahead and press auto. Oh, okay. So, right, Lightroom has made some big adjustments this time. We've gone super vivid, super vibrant. Let's also set our white balance to auto. And it's gone, it's gone a sort of sickly green. So in this instance, no, I don't think Lightroom has done a very good job. And this is why it's important to kind of understand what you want to get from a photo, so that if you press auto and it does this, you can look and say, no, that isn't what I want from this photo. You don't just take Lightroom's word for it and go ahead and publish this to Instagram. So let's kind of work backwards and think, okay, what's it done wrong? Well, the white balance is a biggie, of course. So let's bring that temperature back down. Let's get those skies back to looking a bit more blue, and also that tint, I think, push a little bit, maybe around there. I think that's a lot more natural. We've still got that vibrance, but the color tones are a lot better. If we look before and after. Okay, I'm going to leave the exposure up because it was quite a dark photo, so I already knew that I was going to need to lift that exposure. So let's leave that where it is. The highlights, it's dropped, understandably, because there was a lot of highlights in the sky. So let's keep that really far down. Those shadows, though, I think it's brought up too much, because that's when it's starting to get that HDR feel that we don't like. So I'm going to bring those back down. I do want to lift them a little bit, but nowhere near as much as it has done. In fact, I think just around +10 is probably enough. And those whites, I like lifting those because that, again, it adds a little bit more contrast. It adds a little bit more pop to the scene. So around +50, and dropping those blacks around -21. So that is a point that I'm happy with. And I got there, I think we're talking about a half and half between me and Lightroom. Lightroom started us off, and I've kind of nudged it back into an area that I'm happy with. And that's always important when you're using any kind of auto settings, is don't just take it and run with it. Have a little bit of a tweak and see what you can do. So back and forth. I think already we're onto a much better looking shot here. But there is more I'd want to do. I actually think that I think a 1-to-1 crop on this, and I don't normally do 1-to-1 crops, but in this I think it's going to work because most of the interesting information is on the right side. Where this tree branch sort of hangs down is basically what I want the end of my frame to be. Everything else on the left is superfluous, really. So let's go ahead and select 1-to-1 square aspect ratio, and we'll bring that in. I'm going to straighten it a little bit. I think something like that now looks a lot better. I'm just having a look at the sky, and I think we do still have quite a lot of purple tones, so I'm going to just play with the purple slider in the hue panel. And I'm right, if we have a look around, the amount of difference that is making in changing the purple slider on a blue sky, a lot of the information in a blue sky is in the purple channel. It's not always just in blue and in cyan or aqua. It is in purple as well. So I think bringing that purple slider down makes that sky go from being a sort of a bluey, purpley tone, and it brings it back down into being an actual blue sky, which I really like. I don't want to go all the way when it starts getting a little bit too cyan, so I'm going to leave it at something like -70-ish, which I already think looks a lot better. We could try playing around with the luminance of that as well and just darkening it down slightly. Maybe doing the same on the blue channel, which I do quite like, but I also want to bring the saturation back. So we get slightly more of the contrast in that sky, but of course when you darken a sky, it also increases the color saturation, so bringing that saturation back out. I quite like that. It looks a bit more edited. It doesn't look quite as natural and as breezy as maybe it did before. If we just flick that on and off, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and undo what I've just done in that blue luminance. I don't think it needs it. And if we turn that on and off, we can see now that what we've done is we've removed that purple color cast, and it's now a much more natural blue tone. But there is almost nothing else that I would want to do to the rest of the scene. I think it looks great. I mean, yeah, we can play around and we could try pulling those greens back into, into the yellows, but I don't want to. I love the colors in this. It's very vibrant. It's very summery. And that's everything I want to do. And I think that Lightroom has done a very good job in getting us a lot of the way there, which has been great. So let's move on. And our next shot is this one that I took in Scotland in September last year. This is a shot that I was really pleased with at the time because it was early morning. We had lovely light coming through, but it was, I don't think the camera's done a very good job of capturing this, or I've done a very good job at capturing it in camera, that is. So let's go and hit auto. Okay, so it's brightened it up, as we can see. Let's also change our white balance to auto. And okay, we've got a lot further to where I wanted this shot to be. If we look back and forth, it's warmed the scene up, it's brightened the scene up, and I think that's good. So let's see what it's done. It's brought the highlights down. Yep, I think that's probably smart. I might not bring it down quite as much. I think somewhere around there. And it's brought those shadows up. That is good. There's a lot of shadowy areas in this shot, and I think bringing those shadows up is a good move. The whites, again, great. That gives a lot of pop. And the contrast, that's fine. I'm actually going to put the contrast back to 0. The white balance, I think we can definitely do with upping quite a bit. I'm going to bring it up to there. And I'm going to bring up the purples again, just to get that sort of richness of the early morning back, similar to what we did in the sunset shot in the previous one. Vibrance and saturation is up the vibrance, slightly brought down the saturation. I think that looks absolutely fine to me. There's not loads that I would want to just do in Lightroom. I think in my edit for this, I maybe did some more Photoshop work and I selectively put some light in some places. But I do want to have a little play with the HSL tab. We're going to bring those greens down into the yellows. If we just move that up and down, you know what? We haven't really got a lot of green, but what is there is now yellow. The yellows we're going to pull down slightly more into the oranges. And the oranges, ever so slightly, we're just going to nudge down. That's just giving it a much more autumnal feel. It's warmed everything up. It's given us the look of old autumnal leaves. And this was in September, so it was very much autumn. And I think this is just, it's not faking it. It's just emphasizing what's already there, I think. I mean, yeah, I suppose it is a little bit fake, and I think I've gone too far. Again, I've gone too far. So let's maybe bring back those yellows. We could try bringing the oranges down, just to emphasize the oranges in the scene, but bringing the yellows back so we don't just have one orangey yellow color palette. And you know what? I actually really like that. I think that is a lot better. We've still got green leaves going on in this overhanging tree, but we've also got those deep oranges in there as well. We've also got the deep orange color on the fir tree that's balancing on that rock. It's orange on one side, it's green on the other. We've got loads of detail. I actually think that looks pretty good. I'm also going to just try in the split toning, selectively adding a little bit of warmth to the highlights. About that. Maybe a little bit of blue in the shadows. Just a touch. Something like that. Or maybe even a little bit of purple. Yeah, that might be a little bit better, but I'm going to tone it down to just 2. Turn it on and off. I think that's quite a subtle effect, but I think that makes a lot of difference. So this one, I think I've done maybe a little bit more over and above Lightroom's own auto adjustments, but I think that we've got a shot which looks really good. If we look at the before, straight out of camera raw file, it's very, very dark, not a lot going on. It's very, very blue and cold as well, which does not fit the warm autumnal scene which was there. Now what we've got is this much more beautiful shot. It's quite mystical. There's a lot that we could do more in Photoshop to get more of that dreamy effect going on. Maybe this is one I'll return to. If you're interested, do let me know in the comments below. But we're going to leave this shot just there and move on to our next one, which is this scene, again in Scotland on my road trip, overlooking this nice bay. Now, I actually really like this in its pretty much raw form. What I really liked about this scene is we've got this quite soft light that just, we haven't got huge amounts of contrast. We don't have deep black levels. We don't have massive highlights. Again, if we look in the histogram, most of the information is centered around the middle. So I'm interested to see what auto does here. So let's have a look. Okay, not necessarily as bad as I was thinking. Let's go with auto white balance. Okay, so the white balance has pushed it too warm. So immediately I know I want to cool that back down somewhere around there. And I do think that it's added a bit too much contrast by firstly pulling down those highlights. It's also dropped those black levels a bit, and I also don't want it to bring those shadows up. So I suppose what I'm saying is it's done too much. I think it's spoiled the quite soft look that we had here. So bringing these back, let's have a little look before and after, and before and after. And I think we could stand to just bring that exposure down a touch. I'll leave the contrast where it is. Maybe bring those whites back down. Then we can start maybe dropping the blacks just a little bit, because I do like what it does. If we just bring it up and down a little bit, I do kind of like what it's doing on the rocks, sort of in the top thirds of the frame. Nowhere near that much, obviously. Maybe something around there. Maybe bring those shadows down a touch. So yeah, I've upped the contrast a fair bit. But that is what I would do. And I think that's reasonably different to what Lightroom's auto edit did. But I do like that shot, and I think it's a very natural scene. I think it's one of those shots that's very easy to overdo the edit, so I would leave it there, I think. So I'm going to move on to the last one, and this is a shot of the Cailescu Bridge, again in Scotland, and I really love this bridge. It's photographed a lot, certainly automotive photographers, because obviously you put an amazing car on that bridge and ooh, you've got a great scene. I did this as a panorama. I think I took 3, 4, maybe even 5 actually vertical shots, stitched them together, but what we're seeing here is just the stitched shot. There's no auto settings in the stitching. So let's go and have a look. We'll press auto. Okay, it's known what to do, and what it's done is bring up those shadows, bring down those highlights in the sky, giving us a more balanced image overall. And I think that's a really good start. Yeah, I think that's about what I would do to start with. I would want to really raise up those shadows, maybe even a little bit more. I can't remember where it put it, but I'm going to take them to 60. That brings in all this detail over here, which looks good. Yeah, dropping those blacks, I think, gives us. Yeah, I'm really pleased. I'm pleased overall. We didn't look at white balance. Let's look at the auto. And yeah, the auto has given us a bit of a sickly green tint. I actually really liked it as it was, straight out of camera. So I'm going to go ahead and go with as shot, and just warming up a touch. And actually maybe a little bit tint this way too. Let's try warming up. Oh, no, there we go. That, I think, is about where I'd want to go with this shot for now. But of course, again, Lightroom does not do our cropping for us. And we've got a little bit of it's not done a neat, fully neat stitch. It's sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Distortion. It's distorted slightly, and I don't want that in my shot. We don't want distortion. So I'm going to bring this in. And I actually think what I'm going to do is keep this as a very wide, as a panorama in this really, really wide scene. So let's do this, and we're going to move it over here. We want to keep this mountain on the right. I think something... maybe something like that as a crop. Obviously, you can go back in Lightroom and you can adjust your crop all you want. For now, I think this is a good starting point. The other thing that Lightroom doesn't do automatically is any kind of local adjustments. And as I've mentioned in some of my earlier editing videos, local adjustments are the way to really transform your photos. Because yeah, sure, you can play around with exposure, with the slider, but that's going to affect everything in the shot. And you don't always want to affect everything in the shot. You might want to handle the sky differently to the ground, because of course they've already got very different tones. And you can do that particularly by using the graduated filter. So what we're going to do is reset that exposure. So we've got no settings automatically applied. And we're going to drag in this filter that's just going to affect the sky. If we just click select mask, show mask, everywhere where it's pink is where it's going to make our changes. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to bring down the exposure, and I want to really amp up the drama in that sky. We're going to up the contrast. We're going to drop the highlights just a touch. We're going to drop the shadows. We're also going to up the clarity and a little bit on the dehaze. It's very much about having a dramatic, contrasty, imposing sky, and using those filters is a very, very good way of doing that. So if we just have a look at that without and with, it's obviously a huge difference. Lightroom cannot do that itself yet. Maybe it will. But right now, it can't do that. I mean, I have gone overboard again. So let's pull back that clarity, and let's pull back that contrast a little bit. Okay, I mean, we do want it to be dramatic. So yes, this is a big change, but we don't want to go as far as I did before. So I'm going to put another one in, just darkening the bottom of the scene, which is really going to help draw your eye to the bridge in the middle. That's what we want. So let's just bring that down a little bit more. Something a little bit more like this. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. And from this point, I think we've already got we've got a good foundation image here. We've got nice colors, we've got even tones, we've got a dramatic scene. Anything else, it goes above and beyond that. It's at this point where you can start playing around with the hues and the saturation. And, you know, if you want to get that autumnal tone, then yeah, you can start shifting this down and, you know, maybe taking out some of those oranges a little bit, taking out some of those blues, darkening it down, just starting to up the luminance there. I'm just playing around. I don't remember what I've done in this edit particularly. Also going to just bring the vibrance down and the saturation up the same amount. Always a good technique to get dramatic looking edits. I'm not going to do any more on this right now, because just for this video, I wanted to really focus on how well the auto mode does. And I think this shows that well enough. Maybe I'll do another deeper edit on this. But overall, I think I'm actually quite impressed with how well auto has done on some of these shots. So I do encourage you, particularly if you're just starting to kind of learn the basics of Lightroom, click that button, see what it does. If you're not sure about how you've done an edit on an image, just see what Lightroom would do. You don't need to click it and leave it. You shouldn't click it and leave it. You should make sure that you know how you're getting the results that you want. But it's a good way of kind of getting a little bit of inspiration, maybe of how you could edit the shot. And it's a good way of kind of seeing how the computer would recognize how to make your image correct, and then how you can take it further from that point. So, as I say, do encourage you to experiment with that as much as you fancy. Even if you have been a photographer for a long time, you may still find that you get different results just by using this auto mode. So I'm going to leave the video there, but thank you so much for watching. I do hope this has been helpful. If it has been helpful, do please hit that like button, subscribe if you don't already, and I will see you next time.